Hello once again from the Prim Reaper. So, I had a few different plans to do for a video this month, but in all honesty, I feel like a more pressing matter has arisen. I have seen a few very large public male figures denouncing therapy, especially therapy for men. Now, this is not necessarily an unusual thing. After all, there has often been a lot of stigma about going to therapy in general, and there are, admittedly, a lot of societal expectations on men that, in many ways, preclude the idea of men going to therapy. Things like men needing to be able to handle things or figure things out on their own, stigma against showing weakness, or even just the idea that you can get more effective help for your problems elsewhere. And if all of this wasn't enough of a barrier, then you also get disgusting nonsense like the stuff the APA put out in their guidelines on men and boys, and the otherwise ideological capture of the profession seen in examples like the required for graduation social justice classes, like the one I highlighted in one of my early hijacking of higher education videos. Regardless of all this, though, when I see a high-profile post talking about not going to therapy as though it's some kind of bragging point, and someone uses my APA videos as an example of a justification of that point, I have to hang my head in my hands and say, no, that's not what I'm trying to get across at all in creating this series. I am not trying to say that therapy is a useless or worse, harmful practice that men should strive to avoid. I mean, obviously, I work as a therapist after all. What I am trying to say is that there are unfortunately a lot of people out there in my profession with a lot of really bad ideas about men. I am trying to be a public voice, calling out some of these bad practices to dissuade people from engaging in them and also empower others in the field, and outside the field as well, to speak out against them as well. And also, I am trying to provide men who are seeking therapy with a list of things to look out for when finding a therapist to ensure they find someone who is going to help rather than harm them. I feel like by this point I scarcely need to go over the risks of some of the ideological nonsense coming up in therapy, but for completeness' sake in this discussion, I'll just offer a brief overview. If you get a bad therapist, one who aligns with a lot of the stuff I've been taking down in the APA guidelines, not just for men, but also for women, I may decide to go over those after I'm done with the APA guidelines for men and boys, just for a humorous point of comparison. The differences are quite striking. You not only run the risk of wasting plenty of your time and hard-earned money, but far worse, there is a chance you may encounter someone who downplays or minimizes your concerns, focuses on things that are not actually relevant to your life or to your goals for therapy, or worse yet, blames you in some way for your own problems. This blame may range from the more subtle, such as implying your masculinity is harming you or causing you to fail to express your emotions in a way the therapist deems as suitable, or flat out asking you to apologize for and or advocate against the collective actions of all men against women. And if you think that last one sounds a bit outlandish, well, I wouldn't blame you, but clearly you've never read the feminist therapies section of a psychology textbook. I've covered one in one of my earlier videos. I encourage you to go check it out. But anyway, with all of this at risk, surely there are good reasons for men to avoid therapy, right, Prim? Well, I would begin by offering a simple response to this. Therapy is not bad for men. Bad therapists are bad for men. Frankly, bad therapists are bad for everyone, but I'm trying to stay mostly on point here. In my opinion, what I talked about in the previous paragraph is not even what I would truly consider therapy in the first place, but in order to avoid a no true Scotsman fallacy, I'll simply come at this discussion from the other direction and say the following instead. Therapy, at its heart, is, or should be, about genuinely helping clients with the concerns that they bring to the room, taking their worldview and experiences into account, working specifically towards their goals, and providing them tools and interventions to help with that process. it should be a given that throughout this process, building a strong therapeutic alliance with the client is of the utmost priority, as is creating a legitimately safe environment so that clients can share what is going on for them without fear of being judged. And yes, as much as some social justice advocates may not like it, this does include people that you disagree with or view in some sort of negative light. If a competent therapist is able to check their completely irrelevant personal politics at the door the moment they step into their role as a counselor, therapy can be of just as much use to men as it is to women. Now, don't get me wrong, women and men do, as an aggregate of each population, have a bit of a tendency to use therapy differently. For example, on average, it is more common for women than men to use therapy as a space to vent about a problem and to seek emotional support. And similarly, on average, men want to know pretty early on about what therapy can actually do for their problems and want more concrete solutions to things. I think there is a pretty significant misconception about the purpose of therapy, as it is not exclusively to offer a place for people to cry about their problems and for a disinterested therapist to sit off to the side and offer theirs. There's quite a lot of different ways I work with my clients to provide tangible supports with their situations. I thought that a useful part of this video would, in fact, be showcasing some of the most common concerns that I see with clients and some of the ways that I work with them. Although these processes are always more effective working in the context of knowing someone's background and history, there are still many of these that each of you might be able to use to explore your own situations as needed. So, the first thing I'll talk about is a cognitive behavioral therapist's bread and butter, the thought log. I like to get a good sample of some of the negative thoughts that run through my clients' heads and how they are feeling when these thoughts come up. When I have this information, it's a really great opportunity to scan for what we like to call cognitive distortions. Now, cognitive distortions, for those of you who don't know, are common thinking errors that we are almost all universally prone to at times, even if just in passing. But for some people, these thinking errors become habit and effectively become the lens through which people view the world. I'll go over a few of the more common examples that some of you may even be prone to thinking. First is mental filtering, in which people may tend to over-focus on the negatives in any given situation, letting them overshadow any positives. Another side of mental filtering is called disqualifying the positive, in which people downplay or even outright dismiss any positive things that happen to them as being a fluke or not really real. Another common one is overgeneralization. Not exactly the same sort as what I often criticize on this channel. This kind of overgeneralization is basically just assuming that struggling in one area of your life necessarily means that you will struggle in other areas as well. I see this commonly in people who have been in such a difficult situation for so long that they kind of develop a learned helplessness or an inability to do even basic things in their lives. And the last one I'll go over is called emotional reasoning, where someone will assume that their negative emotions about any given situation are necessarily reflective of reality. So, for example, because you feel like someone is a terrible person, that must necessarily mean they are a terrible person. Or because you feel hopeless about a situation, that must mean the situation really is hopeless. This is just a very small sample of some of the cognitive distortions I see. Part of working with clients on these thoughts is recognizing when and how often they are arising and working to come up with and practice more realistic and reasonable alternatives. This often takes time and persistence, but if people are willing to work at it, they often find significant improvement in the way they are thinking about themselves and their situations. Another thing that I commonly do with clients is a process called behavioral activation. To break this down as simply as possible, many people often get it in their mind that they will wait to do certain things until the right mood or the right motivation hits. Behavioral activation instead posits that it actually works best in reverse. You do the thing, and then the positive emotions follow from it. So, the initial part of behavioral activation works by helping clients to detect activities in their day-to-day lives that boost their mood, and working to build more of those positive activities into their days to help get dopamine flowing in the brain again. There are generally two general types of positive activities I like to focus on. Those that involve pure pleasure, so things that you do just because you enjoy them, and those that involve developing a sense of mastery or completion, so things that may not immediately feel good in the moment, but that contribute to a sense of building one's skills in one's life. Part of this process often involves a deeper values exploration. I like to say that having strong values in one's life, not only just in the now, but also in the sense of building towards who you would ideally like to be, is like having a guiding roadmap. We can use those values to help create goals to work towards to feel like one is leading a more meaningful life. It can be a slow process, but it does depend on how much effort clients are willing to put into it. More effort at the outset equals more progress more quickly. The last example of an exercise I will do with clients that I'll provide as an example here is to work through mindfulness exercises with clients to help with confronting stressful feelings like anxiety, grief, anger, or whatever else through mindfulness processes. One such way I do this is to help clients with inducing the stressful emotion in mind until they're feeling at least a 6 out of 10 on their subjective stress rating. Then, through a meditation process, I guide clients through exploring the sensations of that emotion and acclimatizing to those sensations so that they no longer elicit such an acute stress response. Most clients report, after spending time doing this, that the stress they feel about it decreases. A large part of the work I do challenges the notion that negative feelings are at all times things to be avoided. Instead, in helping clients to accept that negative emotions are a part of normal life and can be tolerated, and even explored with curiosity, they can learn to lead a fuller life and appreciate a greater depth and breadth of human experience. These are, again, only a few ways in which I work with clients. More generally, much of the work that I do involves a lot of detective work in exploring client backgrounds to detect where problems might have come from in the first place, and applying different techniques as needed depending on the origin of the difficulties. Now, having listened to all of this, could many people probably manage to work through their own problems just fine without the help of a therapist? Certainly. For example, many people are able to recognize when they start experiencing troubles in their lives, start engaging in more self-care activities like exercise regimes, eating better, and accessing social supports, and more power to those people. But others can see significant benefit from having someone to help them work through their difficulties. Again, this is exclusively with a skilled therapist who does not subscribe to the social justice ideologies, of course. That said, how to go about avoiding a therapist that is going to practice in a less than helpful manner? There are a few methods I can suggest. One, you can use tools like Psychology Today, which has a listing of different therapists in any given area where they talk about their practice methods, expertise, and typical clientele. Looking for models of counseling that are evidence-based practices with solid research backings, such as cognitive behavioral therapy and solution-focused therapies, are good places to begin, while feminist, postmodernist, gender lens, and social justice style therapies are obvious things you will likely want to avoid. Many, but not all, therapists will offer free 15-minute consultations in person, online, or over the phone, and this can be a good opportunity to ask them questions and check to see if they will be a good fit. If you want to avoid a direct confrontation, which can be a little awkward, you can ask some subtle questions to assess for anything you might be concerned about. Some examples might be, what are your thoughts on the causes of men's mental health issues today? Or what are your general experiences with male and female clients? Or what made you decide to go into this profession? If you do want to get more direct answers to specific concerns, you can ask things like, I'm curious as to your thoughts on the APA guidelines for men and boys. Or, I've heard some terms in therapy before that I'm a little uncomfortable with, like toxic masculinity or male privilege. Could I get your thoughts on those terms? Any therapist you want to see should be able to answer any of these questions clearly, in a non-defensive manner, and allay any concerns. Even better if they are able to cite research or experience that is supportive of common men's issues. Remember, you're trying to find someone to whom you would be sharing your deepest, most vulnerable secrets. You're within your rights to be picky and careful in doing so. Anyway, I will end the video here. Hopefully this video both clears up my stance on the value of therapy for men and also offers a few examples that some of you may be able to put into practice for yourself. Maybe if folks like this kind of content, I can put out more things like it in the future. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.